1993 was 30 years ago. 30! Do you know what came out in 1993? The Halloween-themed Disney movie Hocus Pocus. Do you know what else happened in 1993? I was born. Both Hocus Pocus and I turned 30 this year. By the way, my birthday just happened on October 19th. Yay. But 30! Isn't that crazy? I feel a connection with Hocus Pocus. I don't know what year I first watched it, but I feel like I've been watching it for most of my life. It may be my favorite Halloween movie, but it's not a favorite movie of mine, nor do I think it's all that spectacular, but I have the biggest soft spot for it, and I can't deny it is so much fun. So, in celebration of Halloween, as well as Hocus Pocus and I turning 30, I wanted to talk about the things that bothered me about the movie. Completely coming from a place of love, by the way. And, okay, I'll mention some things I like, as well as just some general thoughts. So without further ado, hello everyone, my name's Aloubell, and this won't be a formal review of the movie, just literally some thoughts about it that have been floating around in my head for a while. However, if you've never seen Hocus Pocus, I suggest you do so because it's a fun time. But just in case you don't feel like it or need a little refresher, here's a plot summary. In the 1600s in Salem, Massachusetts, there were 3 sister witches, Winifred, Sarah, and Mary Sanderson, who were old and wanted to be young. The only way to get their youth back was by draining the life force of children. In doing exactly this, they end up killing Emily, the little sister of a boy named Thackeray Binx, who heroically tried to stop them from doing so. Poor Thackeray ends up being turned into an immortal black cat by the witches. The townsfolk get word of the witches doing evil witch things, and they capture the Sanderson Sisters and sentence them to death. Before their hanging, Winifred casts a spell that would allow them to be resurrected if certain conditions were met. Fast forward 300 years, and in the same town of Salem, a teenage boy named Max and his family have just moved to town, and Max is having a hard time adjusting to the new environment. On the night of Halloween, he is tasked with taking his little sister Danny trick-or-treating. Sometime during the night, the duo meet up with Max's crush, Allison, and in order to impress her, Max offers to go snooping around the old Sanderson sisters' cottage. Max, once again in trying to be macho, does the exact thing needed to bring the witches back. And now that they're back, they need to steal a child's life in order to not turn to dust by sunrise. Because Max and company, including Thackeray, who revealed himself to the protagonist and serves as their guide throughout the night, have taken Winifred's spellbook hostage, the witches dedicate themselves to hunting them down. Shenanigans, hijinks, and hilarity ensue as the kids avoid getting caught and the witches are exposed to futuristic stuff. At some point, a zombie named Billy gets resurrected as well to aid the witches in their hunt. Eventually, Max and company think they've killed the witches, and when they get too comfortable, end up losing Danny and the spellbook. Things happen, and we arrive at the final showdown, during which Max and company end up defeating the witches due to Winifred's pride getting in the way. With the witches gone, Thackeray can finally die and join his long-since-deceased family, and Billy the zombie, who switched sides near the end, gets to return to his eternal-ish slumber. Max and company then live happily ever after. It's a pretty solid plot in my opinion, and there's no point during viewing the movie where you feel bored or get the sense that there's filler. I mean, now that I think about it, there is kind of some fillery moments, but they're not that bad. You don't really give it that much thought. It's a silly movie that has its serious moments at times, but at the end of the day, it knows exactly what kind of story it is. It's full of camp and has a ton of heart, and so much effort went into it. Having said that, now that you know the story, we can talk about some things that are wrong with some very specific things that happen. Number 1. At some point in the movie, the kids go seek help from other adults, including their parents. This is actually a smart thing to do because the witches might have powers, but you get the impression that they can't do much when they have a large group of people against them. Case in point, the sisters couldn't defend themselves against the townsfolk who hung them, and in the present, felt the need to put a spell on the parents so that they wouldn't interfere. So if the adults could all band together by both getting their children away from the Sanderson sisters, as well as taking the witches into secure custody, then no one would be in any danger. But here's the thing about that. The parents suck, the kids are too panicked to think rationally, and Thackeray is useless. For some strange reason, Max and Danny's parents can't sense the distress that their kids are in. Unless Max and Danny have a history of tracking their parents down in the middle of the night when their parents aren't home just to tell a joke, then they should have taken their kids more seriously. Do I understand where the parents are coming from? Sure. The story of being hunted by witches who died 300 years ago is far-fetched and most logical people wouldn't believe it. However, their kids are clearly spooked by something and they don't put more effort into finding out why.
But Aloe, their dad does seem to sense the urgency a bit because he pulls Max aside, trying to find out what happened.
Sure, but the fact that he and his wife instantly get distracted the moment the Sanderson sisters put on their show is a bit concerning. The spell wasn't even fully set in yet, and the parents thought it was all a joke. On the kids' part, I know they were panicked and were just telling the situation like it was, so I don't fully blame them for not being a little more strategic about this, but I'm still gonna roast them anyway. When they realized that no one was taking them seriously about a talking cat, along with a zombie, and witches who were hunting them, they could have simply just said that they were being stalked by some creepy adults who were trying to hurt them. I feel like this would have been much better received and taken more seriously by almost literally any adult. Also, Danny told her mom that Binx can talk. Why didn't she ask Binx to talk? So that her mom would believe her. In fact, problem number 2, Binx talking would have pretty much immediately got everyone there on their side. Heck, Binx could have done some tricks or something that could have proved he was real, and if we really wanted to push it, he could have gotten himself killed only to revive again just to show that he is in fact a magical talking cat. The blame for this not happening mostly rests on Binx, to be honest. Presumably, he could have been able to talk ever since he got turned into a cat. You could make the argument that he couldn't initially talk since he didn't communicate with his parents after being turned into a cat. But at the same time, Binx never said anything about not ever being able to talk. So, this is either a plot hole, or Binx either learned to talk throughout the years, or he could only talk when the witches were resurrected. If he learned to talk throughout the years, he could have put a little more effort into making sure the black flame candle never got lit. In fact, he probably could have managed to hide it or destroy it by asking for help. It's not like the people of Salem don't know the story of the Sanderson sisters. They're a local legend. They would have known who he was and probably would have picked up on what needed to be done and would have done it. If he could only talk while the sisters were alive, then, again, why didn't he talk to his parents or other townsfolk before they were hanged 300 years ago? Or, at the very least, why didn't he speak up when the kids were asking adults for help?
But Aloe, if Binx spoke at this point in the story, then we wouldn't have gotten the I put a spell on you sequence.
Yeah, that's true. The writers technically had to choose between logic and an iconic moment. And I can't blame them or be mad for their choice. Nevertheless, Binx single-handedly could have solved the problem very easily. And it's not like he isn't smart. He's gained a lot of wisdom throughout the years, so this doesn't make sense.
But Aloe, there is the very extremely real possibility that if Binx spoke to anyone, they might not have cared about his plight and would be more fascinated with the talking cat and would have tried to exploit him somehow. Or maybe they would have listened to him, destroyed the candle, and still exploited or experimented on him. We don't know.
You're right. We don't know. We never got the chance to know or even hear from Binx of why he never tried to communicate with anyone until he met Max and company. Besides, even if it were a possibility for him to be taken advantage of, that definitely sucks, don't get me wrong, but as good old Spock said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. We all want Binx to be happy, but if he could take one for the team for the sake of a bunch of kids being safe, that's probably a gamble he should have taken. And I'm actually pretty certain that if this were a realistic scenario, he would have done exactly that, given that he's a pretty chivalrous, brave, and self-sacrificing kind of guy. Heck, even if he couldn't talk, He was still a cat with human intelligence. I'm sure there's other things he could have done to relay the fact that he was no ordinary cat. And given their location, I feel like someone would have understood who he was. And speaking of Binx, problem number 3. This is a point that my brother brought up, but he makes an excellent point. Binx should have immediately been set free from his curse after the Sanderson sisters were hanged 300 years ago. For one thing, at no point was his curse tied to their resurrection spell, so there's no reason for that to have been the case. You could make the argument that when Winifred cast the resurrection spell, their souls weren't fully committed to being dead, and thus their spells and curses were still in play up until they, quote-unquote, legitimately died. But by that logic, Hocus Pocus 2 kind of ruins this idea, because with that movie's logic, as long as it's possible to create a black flame candle, they can pull a William Afton and always come back. And if that's the case, Binx's curse can never be broken because the witches will never fully be dead. However, since Binx's curse was in fact broken after their second death, this stands to reason that their long-standing spells aren't permanent, that whenever they die, their spells and curses break, which is also proven when the dancing spell wears off from the adults. But since his curse didn't get broken with their first death, this would mean that the curse was tied to their resurrection spell. So I must ask, why, how, and when? Also, interesting how when the curse was broken, it was only the immortality part of the spell that was broken and not the being turned into a cat part. Sure, we probably didn't want to see a dead teenage boy's body, but still. Am I looking too much into this? Yeah, but blame my brother for bringing it to my attention, as I never noticed this before. Problem number 4. If the townspeople 300 years ago knew that the witches were real and could do very bad things, then why didn't they take the resurrection spell more seriously? Even if they believed fully that the witches were dead, you'd think they'd destroy their cottage and the black flame candle just to make sure. People back then were super paranoid and superstitious, so it's odd that they just left all of their stuff alone. And it's not like they didn't know where the black flame candle was either. They did because it was put on display. Heck, they even put the spellbook, which was at the execution site, back into the cottage and made things convenient for the witches for when they returned. So, in reality, all of the problems happened because of them. Problem number 5. If Binx supposedly couldn't talk, then how did anyone know about the events that transpired the night Emily died / when he got turned into a cat? In fact, how is there a legend at all if every important person involved in that situation couldn't discuss it? The Sanderson sisters themselves being legends in itself is fine because people knew that they were bad witches, but if no one knew that Thackeray turned into a cat, then who told the historians / storytellers or whoever that he did in fact turn into a cat in order to pass on this story through generations? Max's teacher told the story and knew that Thackeray was a cat. How did she or anyone know this?
Theoretically, Thackeray could have told someone since he is a talking cat.
Ah yes, but then we arrive back at the problems from number 2 on this list. Problem number 6. Winnie made a joke about driver's permits. How does she know what that is? It's a cute joke and I appreciate it, but story-wise, it doesn't make sense. In order to make this joke, she has to not only know what a driver's permit is, but be able to use it correctly in a sentence. I feel like this was just Bette Midler ad-libbing, which is cool, and again, it's a cute joke, I'm not mad about it, it's just nonsensical. There's a similar instance where Winnie mocks Max by saying that everything is just a bunch of hocus pocus, but this instance of mockery doesn't make sense either because she was never around to hear him say that quote to begin with, so how is she able to mock him? So, like I said, nonsensical. Then again, so is the whole musical number where they understand what microphones are and automatically have a dance sequence rehearsed and ready to go. This is all just part of the absurd campiness of the movie that adds to its charm. Problem number 7. Sarah literally has the power to put children under a spell to make them quiet and compliant, and yet never tries it with Danny, Max, or Allison. Sarah herself not thinking of this is one thing, considering she's, how to eloquently put this? A bit floaty, if you catch my drift. But Winnie not thinking of it, when she's supposed to be the clever one who adapts to things quickly, doesn't make sense. Problem number 8. This isn't a legitimate complaint, just something I find weird. Allison feels kind of weird to me. I sort of realize that compared to the other characters, she interacts the least with the Sanderson sisters. At first I humored the idea that she's kind of unnecessary to the plot since she doesn't interact with them much and generally feels like more of a side character compared to Max, Danny, and Binx. Max is the main person to antagonize the witches and his sister is in danger, so it makes sense why he is more front and center. That and he's the main character. Danny is the main target, so it makes sense why she's important. Binx is the guide and has a more personal history with the witches. And then there's Allison, who has no personal stake in this other than the boy she's interested in is involved. Well, okay, to be fair, she is in danger. She's in as much danger as every other kid in this story, because even though she's a teenager, she is still considered a child and can fall prey to them. So in that respect, she is involved, but you understand what I mean. So she's basically Marinette from Miraculous Ladybug as far as her connection to the main plot goes. But then I realized that she's actually super important, and if she wasn't there, the movie wouldn't happen. Allison is Max's motivation to go to the Sanderson house and light the candle. Allison is the one who thought of the idea to burn the witches. Allison was the one who caused the book to get discovered by the witches, which led to Danny getting kidnapped. Allison knew that salt repels witches, and Allison was the one who knew that daybreak would defeat the witches. So she was super useful and had a purpose for being there, and I don't mind her character. She's nice, intelligent, relatively, and can hold her own in situations. Some fans have even theorized that she might be a witch herself, if not a descendant of witches, which is a neat idea. Either way, she's a good character, just feels a tad out of place for me and a bit weird. I can't fully articulate why. Maybe it's because until it's her turn to be useful, she kind of fades into the background. I don't know. Problem number 9. Hocus Pocus 2. Okay. I'll elaborate. These next points will all be about Hocus Pocus 2, and thus fall under the umbrella of number 9. It's not the worst movie ever, but it has enough things in it that bother me that make me not want to voluntarily watch it again. I won't go into the plot because I don't feel like it, but one of the biggest things that bother me is that this is a #girlboss movie, which means it's the type of movie that complains about the patriarchy and spits on every single male character. Every boy/man is either stupid, useless, pathetic, or all of the above. I hate movies that do that. It's an annoying trope that I've already talked about before in a previous video of mine. Go check that out, by the way. Number 9.2. Spoiler for the movie, but the main trio of girls are new witches who just now got their powers, and they were way too good at said powers after just fully realizing them a few hours ago. This is a common trope of #girlboss movies. Number 9.3. This next point is a bit of a nitpick, but I dislike how the makeup artist and hairstylist handled Sarah Jessica Parker, who played Sarah Sanderson. I know the actresses who played the witches were all like 28 or 29 years older than they were when the initial movie came out, so I understand why the witches look different and, well, older. I'm okay with that. What bothered me was that Winifred and Mary got their original makeup and hairstyle mostly exactly the same, whereas Sarah's hair and makeup were different. This is a petty thing to dislike, but I do in fact dislike it, and this was super distracting to me while watching the movie. Number 9.4. We were teased with the idea of Sarah and Mary rebelling against Winifred, but then they immediately take it back. This could have been so interesting, and they decided to not do it. Blah. Number 9.5. The movie tries to get you to sympathize with and semi-redeem the Sanderson sisters, or more specifically, Winifred. Now, as a Christian, I am 100% all for forgiveness, but as a storyteller, I want satisfaction and logic. With this being a #girlboss movie, we have to include the trope of the very obviously bad women actually being oppressed and having tragic backstories to explain their awful behaviors, with another jab towards the patriarchy. Again, I am 100% all for forgiveness, and I believe if anyone wants to change and be better, they absolutely can. But the Sanderson sisters had no intentions of changing or being better. Besides, Forgiving them is one thing, but attempting to show their characters in a remotely positive light is another. We don't know how many children they've killed. It could have only been Emily Binx, though I doubt it, because Sarah already knew of her siren voice ability and presumably has used it before. This is only speculation though. I don't know if the books that were birthed from this movie went into this detail or not, but whether or not they went full William Afton here or only killed one girl, which is awful in itself, they had every intention of taking out so many more children. Both times they were resurrected. There was no reflecting on their choices or thinking they might have been wrong. No, they were in this for their own benefit. And yes, technically, Winifred did reflect on her decision to use the ultimate power spell since it meant she couldn't have her sisters anymore, and thus she realized what she did was wrong. But that wasn't from a place of, oh, I'm a horrible person who did horrible things to other people, I should stop now type of place. It was more of a, my actions caused me to lose something I love and I literally only care because I was inconvenienced type of thing. And yet, the movie had the gall to try to get us to think that Winnie wasn't so bad at the end when she missed her sisters after they disappeared, and after she gave up her powers, and gave a sincere and soft thank you to the protagonist for reuniting her with her sisters. I mean, yeah, she and her sisters still lost at the end, and they didn't get to do the evil things they wanted, but it seriously felt like the movie was trying to get us to think that they weren't so bad after all, and that's just, I don't even know the right word, ridiculous? Again, and I can't stress this enough, I'm all for forgiveness and giving people chances, but the intent of these witches, storytelling-wise, was never for them to be good or even kind of good. They were like the Joker in that we like them for how goofy and sinister they can be. The point was never for them to be sympathizable or even remotely redeemable. They're lovable villains in that they have awesome chemistry, charisma, and stage presence. I mean, the backstory on them was cool, and extra lore is neat, but to try and evoke such feelings in the end that they're kind of okay people was a hit and a miss. My favorite storytelling trope is the redeem villain, so that's not my problem with this. Actually, no, it is my problem with this because I feel like my favorite trope is being mishandled, and I don't like that. Even if I'm completely off base here and I'm misinterpreting the situation, I just don't like the feeling I was left with at the end of the movie. I just sensed a swing and a miss, and I want to talk about it. My first problem is that the way it's portrayed in this movie is poor, and technically, I could be looking too far into this since technically, the story doesn't explicitly say that the witches have changed for the better or anything, and again, they do still lose and die at the end. But still, if you watch the scene, you'll get the impression that we're supposed to feel some type of way about them. Maybe the writers just wanted us to feel pity and not necessarily think that they are not so bad, and at best, just wanted us to think of them as tragic characters who only ended up the way they did because of the terrible things that happened to them, while not excusing the things they've done. However, strictly speaking from a storytelling perspective, not all villains need to have tragic backstories or be sympathized with. I may love reformed villains, but I don't need them in every story. Sometimes we can just have fun villains who are bad just to be bad. Disney used to know how to do this, but they lost their touch. Number 9.6. There weren't as many practical effects in this movie. There were a lot more sets, green screen, and CGI, which took away from some of the charm of the original movie, which filmed on location, used practical effects and puppets, and used minimal CGI. Do I think Hocus Pocus 2 was downright awful? No. I was mostly entertained throughout the majority of it, and there were good, interesting, and fun things about it, but the annoyances outweighed the moments where I had fun, so I wouldn't voluntarily watch it again. I know Hocus Pocus 3 is being planned, so hopefully the writing and everything will be better. And now that I'm done with my complaints, I can speak with more positivity towards Hocus Pocus. But before I do that, if you're enjoying this video, then cast a spell by hitting the like button and subscribe for more reviews, rants, and rewrites. If you want to support me even more, then click join and become a channel member, where you'll get cool perks such as, but not limited to, access to videos early and live streams. Becoming a member will help me in my dream of having a creative career and providing more entertainment for all of you. Follow me on my socials in the description, and be sure to join our community Discord, link also in the description. If you're still watching at this point, put the candle emoji in the comments. Thank you! The Sanderson Sisters were the absolute highlight of both movies. Bette Midler, Kathy Najimy, and Sarah Jessica Parker have excellent chemistry and eat up every scene they're in. They strike the right balance of so silly that they're entertaining, but threatening enough to add suspense. The main characters are cool, but with the exception of Binx, who is a magical talking cat with trauma, Max, Danny, and Allison aren't all that interesting. Max and Allison are just normal teens, and Danny is just a little girl. They're all clever and have their moments, but compared to the literal magical witches, the literal zombie, and the literal talking cat, they just aren't that interesting, and I tend to want to skip the part with them at the beginning up until when the witches are revived. Not that the normal humans aren't important, and the story needed their character setups, conflicts, themes, and stuff, but the shining stars are the witches, and everyone knows that. It also helps that the witches have really iconic character designs, whereas the humans aren't all that interesting to look at, except maybe Danny, because she's wearing a costume, so she does stick out a little bit more. Special shout out to the actor Doug Jones, who played Billy, for committing to the zombie bit by actually putting live moths inside of a pocket in his mouth. I could never. The movie is also funny. There are some more cringe writing decisions, and again, it's campy, but a good chunk of the jokes land, especially with the witches. Mostly with the witches. I alluded to this next point before, but I appreciated the practical effects. The puppets, the clever wire work, and the many on-site locations. There were obviously some sets being used, but the non-sets were appreciated. Everything just looks more real and believable-ish due to the minimal CGI, and it's all just so nostalgic and charming. I Put a Spell on You is a certified bop, and I love it. It's a shame that the song sequence in the second movie couldn't quite live up to it, in my opinion. So here's the thing. In the first movie, the song sequence came the flip out of nowhere. This movie wasn't a musical. It had no indication of being a musical, so who would have expected it? It was a complete surprise and ended up being super awesome. I Put a Spell on You has such a spontaneous charm. It also felt more natural with what was going on in context. Because, fun fact about I Put a Spell on You, well, it's a fun fact for me because I only just relatively recently realized this, but Winifred didn't just pull this song out of nowhere. The man singing on stage was initially singing a different song, and then he smoothly segued into his version of I Put a Spell on You, which is how Winifred got the idea to sing it as a spell. Maybe that was super obvious to more people, but I didn't know, as I never cared about the singing of the guy on stage. This song narratively had the purpose of showing us how easily Winifred can adapt and think on her feet, as well as to show that the Sanderson sisters were in fact a threat, like on a large scale. It's this sequence that truly isolates the kids because they can no longer go to the adults for help. It's an awesome song and an awesome scene. In the second movie, the song was not only no longer a surprise, but it was completely expected, some would even say demanded, by literally everyone. In fact, they doubled down on the theatrical musical numbers by having one when they first show up, one on stage, and one for the ending credits. One way or another, the stage song in the second movie is a fun time and sung expertly, don't get me wrong, and you can definitely tell there was more money, choreography, and planning that went into it, but it's not as charming in my opinion. Also, how did the sisters know the song? Unlike in the first movie where Winnie learned it from the singer on stage, in the second movie they just happened to know this super modern song that definitely didn't exist in the 1600s. So, narratively, it doesn't make as much sense.
But Aloe, Hocus Pocus is meant to be silly and not 100% make sense.
Yes, I get that. But still. Also, unlike in the first movie where the purpose of the song was to get rid of the adults, the song sequence in the second movie ended up being pointless. They sang the song to find the mayor, but the people were moving so slowly that the witches ended up going along with a different plan. The mayor even gets found, but the witches aren't even there to do anything about it. So yeah, I Put a Spell on You is awesome. Go listen to it, and then listen to covers of it. Oh, and Sarah's theme, famously known as Come Little Children, is another iconic song from the first movie. It's sweet, sinister, and criminally short. And because I know that someone will bring it up, the YouTube creators duo cartoonists made a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fan animation of Princess Luna singing this song with some added lyrics. Luna was voiced by Kate Covington for this project. It's animated gorgeously, so I do recommend it if you're curious. Unfortunately, the original video was deleted a while ago, but some people have re-uploaded it for you to watch on YouTube. It's formally titled Children of the Night. No, I will not discuss other MLP fan works because other than this one and maybe some smaller ones, I was never terribly interested. I only cared about the show proper. Anyway, in Hocus Pocus, Come Little Children, or Sarah's theme, was originally and actually sung by Sarah Jessica Parker. I didn't know she can sing. Granted, I'm not a fan of hers, nor do I watch or follow anything she does, so I guess I wouldn't know that, but I always thought it was dubbed. Speaking of dubbed, our friend Thackeray Binx, when he's a human, is played by Sean Murray, who nowadays is very well known for his role as Timothy McGee on a show called NCIS. Once I found that out, I couldn't unsee that. But anyway, fun fact, he only physically plays human Thackeray. The voice you hear is not his, because he sounded too contemporary and not at all had the accent the movie makers wanted. They hired Jason Marsden to do his voice. Why not just hire an actor who had the voice they wanted? I don't know, but it is what it is. Hocus Pocus initially didn't do that well when it first came out. It was considered a failure. But with home releases of the movie as well as reruns on TV, the movie gained a lot more popularity. Like, its popularity skyrocketed. My favorite thing to come out of Hocus Pocus is what Disneyland and/or Disney World does every Halloween season since 2015. There's this event called Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. I'm not 100% sure what this event entails, but I know that it, in part, features a sub-event called the Hocus Pocus Villain Spectacular, and is a storyline about the Sanderson Sisters getting resurrected yet again, and they essentially throw a party with all of their fellow Disney villains. There's a ton of homages to the original film, and when they actually manage to get actresses who want to be there, are actually trying, look like the original trio, and effectively act like them, it's pretty fun to watch. The highlights for me are the Sanderson Sisters interacting with other villains, as well as the performance of I Put a Spell on You, in which the other villains dance along to as well. Just like Hocus Pocus proper, it's campy, but it's fun. If you aren't able to go to the Magic Kingdom to see it in person, you can watch recordings of it here on YouTube. As for the rest of my thoughts, I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about. Probably. In conclusion, Hocus Pocus, the original movie, is super charming, flaws and all. I definitely recommend it as a fun Halloween flick. So, now I open the floor to all of you. Have you seen Hocus Pocus? What do you think about it? What's your favorite part of the movie? Who's your favorite Sanderson sister? If you haven't seen it, do you plan to? Comment below and let's get this conversation started. Happy Halloween, everyone! And remember, I'm the artistic Aloubell, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe for more reviews, rants, and rewrites. But as for now, that's all there is. There isn't any more.